Okay, now this is chapter 25, I think, and verse 27. No. Am I mixed up?
Page 127. 25, 27.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, so we're at page 127. So we said Rivka came to the end of her pregnancy, and behold, there were twins in her womb. The first one came out, red, entirely like a hairy mantle. They handed him Esau. After that, brother emerged with hand grasping on the heel of Esau. Now, let me just check the Hebrew here. I'm not sure this is right. No. See, it's so tricky. The English writes, so he called his name Yaakov. Well, there's no so in the Hebrew, but it's clearly the meaning of it because Yaakov is Yud Ayin Kuf Beis, and Ayin Kuf Beis is the Hebrew word for heel. So Yaakov, if you would give it a meaning, would be something like healing, with the two E's, not an E-A. Right? He's healing him, holding his heel. So you just have to be careful to distinguish what English is a translation of the words and what English is put in to communicate to you the sense. And Isaac was 60 years old when he bore them. It's not obvious why it says it, but the Rashi doesn't comment to that. Now, the lads grew up, and Esau became one who knows hunting. I don't know what they call it, trapping, but okay. A man of the field. And now, they write but. In the Hebrew, it's above. It means and. Again, implied by the context, there's a contrast, but okay. Jacob was a wholesome man, abiding in tents. Now, let's just try to pay attention even to the English translation and see if we get the words right. Then we'll take a look at the Rashi. You read, the lads grew up and Esau became one who knows trapping or hunting. What does that tell you? It says he became. That means something new happened. He didn't start out that way, and some transition took place at some point in time where this is where he ended up. Okay? But he started off somewhere else. Then it says, Jacob was a wholesome man abiding in tents. What doesn't it say for Jacob? Doesn't say became. Esau became. Yaakov didn't become. So, even though you could push it if you like, you could say the Vayehi in the Hebrew goes on both of them, but it's not obvious, certainly not obvious. The translator here is not taking it that way. And indeed, Chazal don't take it that way. So now we would have to ask, so what was Esau before he became someone who knows hunting? What was he? And the Chazal say, Rav Hirsch brings it, he quotes the Chazal that is not in our corpus of texts, but he says it's a Chazal, so he must have had a manuscript that said it, that Yitzchak and Rivka treated the two of them the same. They both went to Cheder together. They both had an Upsharon at age 3. They got the yarmulke in their tits. Okay, I'm joking. But they were brought up the same, treated the same. And in Yaakov's case, the training took. He adapted to it and accepted it. And in Esau's case, the training didn't take. He didn't adapt to it. And therefore, he had to step out of that training and become something else. That's what's hinted at in the text where it says that Esau became, doesn't say that Yaakov became. And Rav Hirsch holds Yitzchak and Rivka as to fault, that they should have been able to perceive from the beginning that Esau was not meant for this. And he was of a different character. And we have a rule that says, Mishlei Chanuch La'arpei Darko, train the child, not teach. Chinuch is really training. It's not teaching. Train the child according to his own way. Use a type of training that fits his personality. And Yitzchak and Rivka didn't do that. They treated them both in the same way, which is a way that was relevant to Yaakov, wasn't relevant to Esau. So he took a step out because he didn't feel that the way he was being treated fit his personality, and he was right. Where he went and what he did wasn't right, but his sense of being a misfit was in fact correct. Now, let's read Rashi, and then I'll tell you some more things in the verse, which, this is 27. Yeah, the youth grew up, Esau. See, now here, the translation that I printed for you doesn't say became. I think it's a mistake. So Rashi says, oh, come on, stop. And the youths grew up, and Esau was. As long as they were small, they were not recognizable through their deeds, and no one scrutinized them in order to determine their characters because they behaved the same way. You couldn't tell the difference between them. As soon as it became, now he says, in parentheses, 13 years old, this one parted to the houses of study, and that one parted to the houses of idol worship. That's what the measure says. So, as I told you, the say that he's going to the houses of idol worship does not mean that he was destined to be an idol worshiper. He felt at home there because that's where his locus of operation is supposed to be. He's supposed to learn the methods, learn the mores, learn the culture of Avodah Zarah, and then oppose it in order to chase it out of the world. Very much like Abraham, who the Rambam anyway says offered sacrifices to Avodah Zarah with his own hands. The Rambam says that he came to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu when he was 40. And this wasn't a tragedy, and it wasn't an accident. He had to be an insider so as to be able to oppose them and confront them. And Esau was supposed to continue in that spirit. Now, I want you to take a look at 27 again in the text. This verse has two parts. Each part has three pieces. The lads grew up as an introduction. Esau is a name. Became one who knows trapping or hunting. That's his activity. A man of the field, that's his locus. So you have a name, activity, and locus. Jacob is a name. A wholesome man, something about his activity. Abiding in tents, that's his locus. So you have two pieces of text which are parallel. Each has three pieces, and the pieces are corresponding to one another. Now, when you take the corresponding pieces, the first piece and the last piece are perfect. The first, I should have turned that off. The first piece is a name. The last piece is a context. Both of those are strictly correct. When it talks about the activity in the middle, it doesn't exactly talk about activity in the same way. Because in the case of Esau, it says he knows hunting. Knowing isn't an activity. Knowing is a state of mind. Jacob was wholesome. Well, that's also a state of character. Perfect, pure, wholesome. So now you have, when you understand that the hunting is not what he does, but it's what he knows, So then they are parallel in their category. Now the question is, how shall we relate them to one another? What's the difference between a description of wholesomeness versus a description of knowing hunting? Wholesomeness is a moral description. It's a description of the nobility of his character. So now, it's like saying, do you know Peter and Paul? Oh, sure I know Peter and Paul. Peter is a great saint, and Paul works at the stock market. Golly, what a juxtaposition. Like, would you hear something about Paul that maybe he isn't such a great saint? Maybe so he works at the stock market. Okay, you can do that. You can be honest, but still, by contrasting it that way. So, there's an implied contrast here. So now the question will be, when you think about hunting, what would there be, not the activity of hunting, but knowing how to hunt? What is there in knowing how to hunt which could stand as a contrast to being wholesome, being pure, being good? So ask yourself, what quality, what piece of knowledge must you have in order to be a hunter? You could be hunting butterflies, or you could be hunting squirrels, or you could be hunting bears, or be hunting snakes. What quality must you have to be a successful hunter? You must know how to fool the animal. If you don't know how to fool the animal is faster than you are, and stronger than you are, and hides better than you do. You've got to be able to fool the animal. You're going to hunt a land animal, make sure that you are downwind from the animal, not upwind from the animal, because he'll smell you and he'll get away. You want to shoot birds? Camouflage yourself. Because they see you, they won't come near you. They'll go on a different route. So you have to look like the forest. You want to catch an elephant? Dig a big hole in the ground. But don't leave the hole there, because the animal will walk around it. No, you have to cover it over with branches and leaves and mud so it looks like regular ground, so it'll fall in. You have to be able to fool the animal. When the Torah describes Esau as someone who knows hunting and contrasts it with tamim, which is wholesome, the implication is that he knows something which is morally at least questionable. He's capable of deception. He's capable of deception. Now, having said that, I want to introduce one other piece of vocabulary which English speakers are not usually careful about. We'll see it in the upcoming text. What is the difference between deception and deceit?
Pretty much whether or not it's maybe malicious.
Say again?
I guess whether or not it's malicious.
So which one is which?
Deceit seems to be more malicious than deception.
Right. Deceit is something that's wrong. It's a crime. Deception is not a crime. All depends upon the circumstances. The person goes to the doctor and gets a regular checkup, and the doctor notices a heart condition. And they say, oh yeah, you have a heart condition, your life expectancy is 6 months, and I don't think you should do that. My guy might drop dead on the spot. Right? No, there's something that needs further checking, and we'll do another test, and then in the meantime you talk to the family and you prepare them, and because the consequences of being brutally honest can be brutal, and you don't want to do that. So deception can be used neutrally, as you will see in the ensuing stories, when Jacob uses deception, and when the word for deception is used, which is mirma, Unclus translates chochmasa with wisdom or cleverness, which means it's morally neutral. I have seen English translations which use the word deceit, and that's dead wrong, because Jacob is not being accused of a crime when he deceives his father. On the contrary, his father is the one who self-deceived, and Jacob has to respond to it. Anyway, I'm just introducing it so that you should be careful about it. Now, let's see what Rashi says. Given this context in the text, I think you'll see where Rashi is coming from. Who understood hunting. He knew how to trap and deceive his father with his mouth, and ask him, Father, how do we tithe salt and straw? How do you take meiser, 1/10 of your produce, when you have salt or when you have straw? Now, the truth is you don't take tithes of those things. But he's coming off as super from. How about salt? Should I give 10% to the Levi? And in that way, he was doing it in order to trap his father into thinking that he was very frum and very, very generous and wanted to help the Levim and so on and so forth. So, if you read that without what I told you, you think, where is Rashi coming from? Why does he say he's trapping his father? And so forth and so on. Once you see this, and it is a midrash, but Rashi says it because he's basing it on comparing the first half of the pasuk with the second half of the pasuk, the three elements, name, quality, and locus, and reading the contrast of the qualities. Now, a man of the field. Well, if you are a hunter, you're going to be out in the fields. Quite true. As its apparent meaning, an idler who hunts beasts and birds with his bow. So again, once you have the contrast, and you've seen that Esau is contrasted to Yaakov's tomim, which is wholesomeness, then the other elements can be read negatively as well. If you are a hunter, a lot of the time you spend is just waiting for the game to come in view. During which time you could be checking your phone. I mean, you could be sleeping. Okay. And Yaakov, the word tamim in Hebrew is quite hard to translate. It can be pure. In some cases, it can be complete. It can be something like perfect. It can be innocent. The translator, I wouldn't say it's wrong. It's a hard word to translate. So, he now takes this, Rashi, as a contrast with what it says about Esau. He was not an expert in all these matters. Like his heart, so was his mouth. A person who is not astute at deceiving is called a tam, an innocent. We say, there's a phraseology in Chazal, echad b'peh ve'echad b'lev, that you should say what your mouth, what your heart feels. It's very interesting that in this last week's parsha, coming parsha, that it says the brothers hated Joseph. V'lo yachlu dabro v'shalom. They couldn't speak peacefully to him. So when you read that, you think, boy, that's pretty rough, They can't even speak peacefully to their brother. But Chazal take that as a matter of praise. Because to speak peacefully to someone whom you hate means you have to deceive. You have to pretend to be friendly when you really aren't. And they didn't behave that way. They didn't pretend. They spoke what they felt. Of course, they could give a compliment to the wives when the wives buy a hat. Okay, we went through that once upon a time. But to just blithely say what you don't feel in order to make, to be a flatterer, that wasn't in their character. The Rashi saying the same thing about Jacob here. Okay, now we come to a very complex verse, simple, seemingly simple. This, what I'm going to tell you now, is very important in terms of the story and also methodologically. Isaac loved Esau, for game was in his mouth, and they put it in but because of the sense, and Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, let's start the analysis this way. The end of a pasuk says Rebekah loved Jacob. Do you think she loved Esau also?
Yeah.
But then why wouldn't it say so? He's in the story. This isn't Jacob's biography. If it were Jacob's biography and she said, loved him, okay, fine, it's Jacob's biography. This is the story of both boys. Both boys are in the same breath in all the psukim up until now. There's always the two of them together. So Rebekah loved Jacob. So then, at the very least, you have to say, she didn't love Esau equally. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to explain why. It says she loved Jacob, and it doesn't mean she loved Jacob and Esau.
But wouldn't that apply also for Yitzchak to Esau?
I'm coming to that. I didn't forget that. That's what I'm coming to. Yeah, that's what you want to say also? Okay. But now, boys and girls, what are we going to do with the first half of the pasuk? Isaac loved Esau. What? And doesn't he love Jacob? So, does that mean that he doesn't love Jacob? Is that conceivable? No, it's not conceivable. Now, here's where I want to point out to you a false move. Well, we all know that Isaac loves Jacob. That's obviously what it's obviously true. So you can't read the first half of the verse exclusively because it's just not true. That's phony. Excuse me. If you're going to read the second half of this very verse exclusively, Rebecca loves Jacob. Loves Jacob. Esau's not mentioned, so therefore it must be that she doesn't love Esau at least equally. Then you got to read the first half exclusively also. You can't play games and say, well, I know how Isaac is, and I know he loves Jacob, so therefore, no, you can't do that. Now look more carefully at the first half and tell me what the solution is.
Well, it says 4 game was in his mouth.
Now build that into an answer. Yes, it says 4 game was in his mouth, therefore what?
He liked him for a specific reason. There's something about him that he liked.
That's right. The first half of the verse is talking about what I call lunch love. Right? Love for lunch. Isaac loves Esau because Esau feeds him fresh game, right? The only one in the world whom Isaac loves for lunch is Esau. That's true. Isaac doesn't love Jacob for lunch. Both are exclusive. Each one says what it says. But in the case of Isaac, fatherly love isn't being discussed. Fatherly love isn't being described. What's being described is lunch love. And that indeed is exclusive. So both are exclusive, and this is now a setup for the next 6 pages of text, because there's a division between them. As we will see, Isaac, of course, loves Jacob as a father loves a son. No question about that. But that's not relevant to the story, not till the very end of the story. In the meantime, there's something going on here that he loves Esau, and for the sake of lunch, and the other side. Yeah, you want to say?
Is part of it also selective in order for him not to lie? It's like if someone comes out and they like, do you like my outfit? And you tell them, I think your hat's very nice. You point to one thing specifically, but you ignore the rest. Is it like that there, where he's pointing to one thing in order to show that he loves specifically this attribute, and it kind of excludes the rest of Esau?
I mean, that's what it says, doesn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that you have to go. It's not interpretation. So it says he loved him because game was in his mouth.
Because the way that you said it made it seem like I exemplify this love over that of Jacob. As in, when it comes to specifically this one thing, I love it over Jacob, as opposed to just interpreting it as the one thing that I love about Esau is this thing, as opposed to the rest.
Oh, I didn't mean to imply that this is something which he, over Jacob. This is something that Esau has that Jacob doesn't have. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't have to mean that there's any superiority in value in Esau over Jacob. That doesn't follow. I have 2 soldiers. One packs the boxes full of bullets, and the other one takes the boxes and shoots bullets at the enemy. Well, the one who shoots bullets at the enemy is not packing the boxes, is he? No, he's not packing the boxes. But the fact that this one's packing the boxes doesn't give him any superiority over the one who's shooting them. It's just he's doing something that's necessary. But it's not a superiority.
I was meaning in the other way around, as in he naturally holds Jacob to a higher standard, or he naturally loves Jacob more, and he's rather just pointing to a trait to which he loves Esau more than Jacob.
But why is the more? I mean, again, there's
not more, but in a specific area where he appreciates.
So that's the distinction I just made.
Okay, yeah.
He loves him for this. He doesn't love Jacob for that because Jacob doesn't have that. But there's no more involved, because the place that Jacob occupies, as we will see in spades, Jacob occupies is infinitely superior to the place that Esau occupies.
So like you were saying before, we wouldn't read it like with the case of Rebecca, who she loves Jacob more than she would with Esau. We wouldn't read the same for Isaac, of Isaac loving Jacob more than he loved Esau.
Yeah, right. But again, Rebecca's love is the kind of love which is equally available to both sons. It's a mother's love for a son. Without any other qualification, that's what Yeshivat is talking about. So, that being the case, if it says that she loves Jacob, it doesn't say that she loves Esau, That means that her mother's love was more intense for Jacob than it was for Esau. There you can compare one dimension of love for two people. In the case of Esau, only he was a hunter. Jacob wasn't a hunter. So there's no comparison built into that other than what you mentioned, that only Esau was a hunter. So Isaac could only love Esau being for a hunter because he was the only hunter. But then if you want to build out of that a comparison to Jacob, the only comparison you can build is Esau was a hunter, Jacob wasn't a hunter. And so therefore, in comparison, Jacob can't get lunch love because he's not providing lunch. That's all. But more you can't get. You see, there's no more there at all. It's like the guy who packs the bullets and the guy who shoots the bullets. Right? Only the guy who packs is packing. The guy who's shooting is not packing. But that doesn't mean he gets any more than the guy who's shooting. The guy who's shooting is winning the war. This guy's a means to winning the war.
Okay, so in both cases, it's not talking about loving one more than the other, rather just in specific areas.
Which both cases are you talking about?
The case of Isaac and Rebecca.
No, in Rebecca's case.
It is, okay.
Of course, because it's one dimension of love. It's the same dimension. And if you tell me that you have it for one and not for the other, then in that dimension, that's the one dimension that's available to both of them. So you can compare in quantity how much of this type of love he gets and how much of this type of love he gets, because it's the same dimension applying to both.
But what is the dimension for Rebecca? That's the part that I'm confused about.
Motherly love.
Motherly love, okay.
Right? Because there's no qualification. It just says that she loves. Yeah, we're together? Okay. Fine. Now, I forgot to produce more Rashi, so I will take you through the next psukim in terms of plain shot, and we'll do the Rashi Samara Mizashem. I mean, we have the Rashi here, but you have an English Rashi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, very good. I didn't know that. This is Rashis Genesis. Where is it? Oh, this has Rashi. That's very good. Okay, so we're up to 25, 29. Okay. Maybe we can use this all together. 25. I know there's a whole bunch of them. Oh, very good. Okay. 25, 29. Here we are. Okay, now comes a very, very crucial sequence. Let's just read the four verses and get an idea of the story and get some understanding of it, and then we'll take a look at the Rashis. Jacob boiled a stew. And Esau came in from the field, and he was exhausted. Esau said to Jacob, "Pour into me now some of that very red stuff, for I am exhausted." He therefore called his name Edom. Later, his name was called Edom because Edom in Hebrew, Edom means red. Jacob said, "Sell as this day your birthright to me." And Esau said, "Look, I'm going to die. So of what use to me is a birthright?" Jacob said, "Swear to me as this day." He swore to him, that is to say, Esau swore to Jacob. And he, Esau, sold Esau's birthright to Jacob. Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank, got up and left. And Esau, the Hebrew word could be despised. Belittle is a little weak. Despised the birthright. Now let me tell you how this plays out in Des Moines, Iowa, and in Jakarta, Indonesia, and in Adelaide, Australia, and other places in the world. Esau's been in the field the whole day, and he hasn't eaten, and he hasn't drunk, and he's dying. He's dying. Comes in from the field, and Jacob's making supper. And he says, "Jacob, I'm dying. Give me something to eat." Jacob says, "You? Die, you worm! Die! I don't care if you die." But we're brothers. Brothers, how can you not have pity on me? You want to live? Birthright. Pay up the birthright. But brother, it's my future. It's my whole life. How can you ask for the birthright? Then die. What can I do? I'm going to die. So, okay, I guess I'll give over the birthright. And thereby, Jacob cheats and oppresses and victimizes his brother, and then Jews become identified as cheaters and victimizers and oppressors. The whole long story, okay? Fine. That's where it plays in all those places and other places as well. I want you to go through the text we just read and find me 4 proofs that Esau is not dying. At least 4. Some people want to say there are 6. But at least 4 proofs that Esau is not dying.
He clearly came to him. You said it was exhausted. It was like walking to someone, asking for soup. Is different than if I'm on my deathbed and please come over here. I have to.
So what you said 2 things now. Are you saying 2 different things, or are you saying?
I'm saying one thing, and that the fact that he's not really dying, he's just exhausted.
Well, so stop. Number 1, it says exhausted.
Yes.
And in fact, it says it twice. The text describes him as being exhausted, and he says, I am exhausted. So you might have thought that people would read exhausted and think, exhausted means exhausted, You might have thought that, but that's asking a lot. So, okay, so we have a double, I count that as 1, not 2. Okay, number 1. The other thing you said, he's walking. Yeah. Okay, he could be staggering. He could be crawling on all 4s. I don't know if we could bring too much, although some people want to say that one. Okay, what else?
Was it from line 29 to 33? Or?
29 through 34.
Oh, okay. I'd say is food the first thing you require after you're exhausted?
Is what it say?
Is food?
Okay, the question is how are you taking care of him? Pour into me some of that red stuff, stew. Is that? It's a little odd. As a choice of way to deal with somebody who's really dying. Okay, what else? There's much more here. Yeah.
Also says after he ate and drank, he got up and left.
Yeah, this is McDonald's, fast foods. Ate, drank, got up and left. I have things to do. That's not a man who's dying. Let him convalesce in bed for a couple of days. No, ate, drank, and got up and left. That's certainly not dying. What else?
So, what used to me is my birthright.
Well, there I think this where the person who is holding this false position says, "Oh, what year is my birthright? Seeing that I'm going to die." That's what he says. That's where they want to build in the idea that he's dying. I'll show you in a minute that that's wrong also. But these other pieces of text show that the conclusion that he's dying is a wrong conclusion. What to do with this text? We'll have to do something with the text. But what else? What about the very end? What does the very end say? He belittled the birth. He despised it. How do you read that? What does that mean?
He didn't appreciate it.
He didn't appreciate it. Now let me ask you a question. Let's suppose he's really dying. Really dying. And the only way for him to stay alive is to give up the birthright. Would you call that belittling the birthright if you use it to stay alive? No. Not necessarily. You belittle something when you give it up for something else that's worthless or worth very little. Give it up to stay alive. One of the queens of England was quoted on her deathbed, "My kingdom for another 5 minutes. I give away my whole kingdom to stay alive for another 5 minutes." That doesn't mean she belittled the kingdom. What goes the kingdom for you if you're dead? So if the text says he belittled the birthright, it can't be that he's dying and he's willing to trade it to stay alive. That's not called belittling. If he's exhausted and he's too tired to make supper, and he might have to go without supper, and he trades the birthright for supper, that could be called belittling it. But not if it uses it to stay alive. Okay, now you'll say, but Rabbi, it says I'm going to die, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. But as a matter of fact, in Hebrew, I'm going to die isn't the same as I am dying. Those are 2 different words. 2 different phrases in Hebrew. In Hebrew, here, you have Hine Anochi Holech Lamus. Holech Lamus literally means going to die. Okay? Now, hold on to this place and take a look.
You see it in Shmos or you see it in
No, it's here. Second. Before this. I can't turn these pages. I'm getting here. 1 second.
What are we looking for?
Hine Anochi Meis. Yaakov says, Ani Meis. Maybe it's later on. 1 second. Ta-da.
Is it Yakov saying it?
Yes. It's in Vayechi. It's Yoshis. Yes. Okay, this is chapter 48, verse 21. 48, 21. In this text is on 533. And this will be a surprise. If you know a little Hebrew, almost no one knows that this is a usage of the word in question. Here's Jacob speaking to Joseph. Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef. Hine Anochi Meis. Behold, I am Meis. Now the chorus says, but Rabbi, Meis means dead. Really? But he's talking, isn't he? And indeed, in the next sequence, he's going to call all the brothers together. He's going to give them all blessings. So I guess he isn't dead, right? But he says, Meis. And as the translation here says, I'm about to die. I'm dying. So Meis can mean dying. That's how you say dying in Hebrew. So when Esau says by us, Holech Lamus, it does not mean dying. It specifically does not mean dying. It means I'm going to die eventually, and therefore I don't want the birthright. We'll have to still understand what that means. What does he mean? Everybody's going to die sooner or later. Doesn't that mean that in between that you would like to have certain things to happen? Somehow, in Esau's mind, this is how he looks at it. Okay? So now I have 4 proofs that he's not dying. He's exhausted, and he says going to die, and he eats, drinks, gets up and goes, and he despises the birthright. If you needed any more proof, and some people, they're not satisfied, they have an infinity of proof. Take a look Take a look over here. I think it's verse 41? Yeah. So now, before that, take a look. Chapter 27, verse 36. This is in a sequence which we will study in great detail, the sequence of the blessing that Isaac wanted to give to Esau, and it really had to go to Jacob. And when Jacob gets the blessing and Esau finds out about it, Esau says the following: was his name called Jacob? What is it? I don't know why it says was. This is why his name was called Jacob. He outwitted me these 2 times. Remember, Jacob is the one who's holding on to the heel. I told you that meant he's going to take away from the other one what really belongs to him. So Esau says to his father, he's speaking to his father, Isaac, wow, that's why he's called Jacob, because he outwitted me twice. He took away my birthright, and see, now he took away my blessing. A double jip, a double cheat. That's what he says to his father. Now take a look at verse 41, the bottom of 301. Read it and tell me what you see. What do you see in 41?
It says, now Esau harbored hatred toward Jacob.
Keep reading.
Because of the blessing with which Esau got blessed.
Just that one verse.
Because the blessing which his father had blessed him.
Yes.
And Esau thought, my days of...
Just that verse. Just 41.
Oh, okay.
Your hair should be standing on end. No?
I mean,
Go back and read the previous verse and read this verse. Your hair should be standing on end. When Esau complains, what does he say?
he gets this blessing, right?
No, he does not. He says he outwitted me these 2 times. 2 times, he says. Twice. What does he outwit him twice? He took the birthright and the blessing. What does it say in 41? He hates him because of? The blessing. The birthright is missing. It's missing. It's not even there as an adjunct, as a footnote, as a ribui. It's not there at all. Because the first verse is talking about the complaint he makes to his father about his brother. My brother did this to me twice. He's speaking out what he thinks that will get Jacob in trouble. But verse 41 describes what's going on in his heart. In his heart, the birthright is worthless. Worthless, it means nothing. He doesn't hate Jacob because of the birthright. He doesn't even hate Jacob because of something else and the birthright. It's not even worth mentioning. He hates him because of the blessing. You need a proof that to Esau the birthright was nothing? Here's proof. That's why he sold it for supper. So the whole scenario, there is a very famous philosopher who's done enormously good work. His name is Alvin Plantinga, a religious Christian. Did great work in philosophy of religion. Even work that I quote in my book. And he coined, and he was a logician among other things, and he coined the term Jacobean rationality. Reason, rationality of Jacob's style. Meaning using your reason to trick others, to fool others, to cheat others, to extort others, and so forth and so on. He's an outstanding intellectual and a very pious person, and he can't read. I took this from the English translation. Even Lahavdil, the King James, has this translation. I'm not doing it because it's the Hebrew and it's clever and tricky and so forth and so on. It's all here, right? And this is played as if this was a terrible crime on Jacob's part, and there's no crime here at all. Nothing. Zero. So that's good. I'll take you through the Rashis tomorrow. Now, the last thing I want to say is this. Some people will say, listen, Rabbi, I hear what you say, and I see the words and everything else. But you do have to admit that when Jacob goes to take up residence with Lavan, his uncle, and he works 7 years to marry Rachel, and then on the wedding night, Lavan puts in the older daughter, the older sister, Leah. In the morning when Jacob protests, Lavan says to him, we don't do that in our place, to put the younger before the older. Can you feel Lavan's elbow in Jacob's ribs? Like you did, Jacob. You stepped in over your older brother. You took over your older brother. We don't do it like that. Over here it goes in order. Older first and younger second. So the critic will say, isn't this a critique of what he did? It's black on white. Lavan is ranking him out for the fact that he stepped in his brother's place. So I answer, yeah, it's definitely a critique. Who's talking? Lavan Harasha, one of the villains of the text. The author does not put his values into the mouth of a villain of the text. He puts his values into the mouth of a hero of the text. And indeed, you could even say, like Thoreau said when during the Spanish-American War they put him in jail, he said, in times like this, the only place for an honest man is in jail. Because the government is so corrupt that if they didn't put you in jail, something wrong with you also. If Lavan doesn't criticize you, you can worry. Let him criticize me because he's so evil, right? So this is not a critique of Jacob at all. Nowhere in the entire Tanakh is there any hint of a critique, nor in the oral tradition, of Jacob for doing what he did here. And the bedrock of it is what I've taken you through, that the text is absolutely clear that Esau was not dying, and that Esau didn't care a fig for the birthright. Yeah. By the way, we didn't talk about what the birthright is. That should have been the first question, right? We'll talk about that tomorrow. Yeah.
So, I mean, now that we are talking about the scenario with Leah, could it be reasonable to assume that the blessing of the birthright also brought that it was meant from that blessing that Leah was going to marry at that point, like it was already meant to happen that Yaakov would marry Leah, because we learned that Esau was going to marry Leah, but then the whole thing, so like since the moment of the blessing links automatically Yaakov to Leah, because he's now like with the blessing of the firstborn.
I think it's a nice thought. In other words, you're saying that if you thought there was like I said yesterday, if you thought there was an original position where Jacob would marry Rachel and Esau would marry Leah, were Esau worthy, and he's the firstborn, if Jacob takes over the birthright, then he now has taken some aspect of the firstborn into himself. And that way he could become relevant to Leah as well. The truth is that the Zohar says that this was meant to be from the beginning. And when Jacob spent 7 years working for Rachel, and that meant years of spiritual work also. Min HaShamayim, they took all this spiritual effort and sort of reflected it upwards to have it do double duty. That it's preparing him not just for Rachel, but also for Leah, and he didn't know. He was totally ignorant of it. That's why when he wakes up in the morning and finds that it's Leah, he's shocked and he's upset and he's, he takes, he himself didn't know. He himself didn't know. It was hidden from him. He thought that Leah was on a higher level and that he couldn't relate to her. But I think you're right. He takes into himself here an aspect of that. Right? He didn't associate it later.